Hello everyone, this is Charles Walter Buntjer coming to you from San Francisco in the year 2025. I'm doing a video now of my 65th birthday that was in 2005 in New Orleans. I flew to New Orleans late in the afternoon, got a good night's sleep, and the next morning I got up and I took a bus tour to Oak Alley Plantation. Now it's interesting, the plantation is approached with this road with all these trees on it, and I was told that a few years after I went, a hurricane ripped all those trees down. Now the house was interesting in the fact that it was basically run by the slaves. Behind the house was a ditch about 2 foot wide and a foot deep, and behind that were shacks. Now the slaves had those shacks for homes, but they were not allowed to go across that trench unless they actually worked in the house. The house was interesting. In the living room and the dining room especially, they had this huge oak table with maybe a place setting for 10 people, and above it was a sheet about 5 foot by 4 foot perhaps, with wooden poles on the top and bottom, and was hung from the ceiling in the middle of the table. So some young black cute Negro would stand there and pull that cord on it back and forth whenever they had a dinner party or breakfast or lunch, it didn't matter. He had to pull that sucker all day long to keep people cool. Can you imagine when it was 80 degrees or 90 and 80–90% humidity, and they had all these clothes on and the women had these gowns on and everything and stuff sitting there at this table? And I mean, I just can't imagine what it must have smelled like or felt like. The bugs were so bad also that it was interesting that there were little glass plates, and there'd be different things like honey or butter or different things, and then they would have a little glass dome that they put on top so to keep the bugs out. So it sounds romantic, but I don't know, it doesn't really sound that romantic to me. But it was a very interesting tour. The next day I was excited. I was going to take a boat ride and go all around Cajun country, the Bayou, and to see all of the trees that grew in the water and all that sort of thing. Now, there were about 6 of us on the small boat, and we were all anxious because we'd heard about the alligators. Well, the man just laughed, and as we were sailing along in the swamp, it was cold, and we put our coats on and we were freezing. And we said, "Where's the alligators?" He said, "You're not going to see any alligators today because it's so cold. They all find a place under a log or someplace and go to sleep and wait till it gets sunny and warm again. So you could forget that." So he spent hours going around through the trees and seeing the homes that were along the swamp where people lived and fished and all that sort of thing. And then back to the shore. So much for seeing alligators and other wildlife. We didn't see anything but a swamp and trees and a few houses. The next day, I decided to do the Creole Queen, which was a steamship, the paddle, uh, and we sailed around up the Mississippi, and eventually we stopped and docked at some little piece of land with a bunch of dead trees on it. It was all kind of strange. We got off the steamer and walked around and went to the Battle of New Orleans parkland. And that's was a place where one of the last wars were fought. As a matter of fact, I think they said that they had signed the papers, the peace treaty in Washington, but it still hadn't gotten down to uh, New Orleans and the area where they were fighting. So even though they did win against Britain, it was kind of a lost cause in a sense. Now, my hotel was close to Bourbon Street. It was really nice. I could just walk out the door and walk up and down the street and check out all of the clubs and all the bars and everything, and they were open day and night, so I really had a good time doing all that. You can see some of the people. One balcony on a building was full of wannabe Elvis Presleys, and there was a woman with her husband with a great outfit on, a Viking type outfit and stuff. Really, really nice. Then that evening, I was walking around and I met uh, two women and a man that were locals, and they said, "Oh, you go with us?" And I said, "Go with you where?" Well, I didn't realize when I made my plans that it was going to be Mardi Gras. Can you imagine? Wow, Mardi Gras. So we walked up and down and saw all of the fantastic floats and just had a wonderful time. And one of the women wanted to gather beads to take back to the office and stuff. So we all ran up and down the streets and screaming at the people on the floats who were throwing out beads. So we ended up with tons of beads, and I ended up with a bunch of beads all over me too. It was interesting because there was a woman that saw us having so much fun. She came over and wanted to join us. So she and I hit it off, and she said, "You know, we have got to go and have a hurricane." And the rest of them said, "No kidding." I said, "Huh?" And she says, "Come on, come on." So we went to a famous bar and we had a hurricane. Well, we had one, we had two, we had three. I was feeling no pain, and we were carrying on. And I told them, I said, "You know, it's my birthday." So, of course, we had a few more drinks, and I was a happy camper. So then I went back to the hotel, and it was almost midnight. And there in the cocktail lounge was the man and a woman, and they saw me come in, and they laughed and they said, "You've been having a good time." And I said, "Yeah, it's my birthday." "Whoa," they said, "You've got to come sit with us. We'll buy you some cocktails." They said, we're celebrating our wedding anniversary. I said, really? How old are you? 65 and 70. I said, really? And they said, yeah, it's our first marriage. So we've been married for a week now. This is our honeymoon. I said, wow. So we were buying drinks for each other, celebrating their wedding and my birthday. Talk about a good time. So that's the end of my New Orleans trip. It was only 5 days, but what a trip and what a fun time. So anyway, here's to more birthdays. As you can see, I had a lot more all around the world. Cheers.